Hello, everyone. Today we're diving into something that will change how you look at people, power, and culture. We're going to unpack the major shifts in anthropology that I like to call turns that completely transform the way we study human life. This isn't just about old theories, it's about how we've learned to listen better, think deeper, and question what we thought we knew. Follow along because this is going to get good. Now, let's start with the big one. What is culture? To me, culture is the shared language of meaning that people use to navigate life. It's how we express values, tell stories, create rituals, and build community. But culture isn't something you can measure with a ruler. It's emotional, symbolic, and shaped by history from the people of the past. It's lived, learned, and is always constantly evolving. Now here's the key. Culture only makes sense when you see it from the inside. And that idea brings us to our first major turn. The Boasian turn, cultural relativism. Back in the early 1900s, a man named Franz Boas stood up against a lot of racist and colonial thinking in anthropology. At the time, people believed in a hierarchy of cultures, basically that the Western society was the most evolved. But Boas said absolutely not. He argued that no culture is better than another, that every culture has its own unique logic, and that to understand it, we need to study it on its own terms. This idea, cultural relativism, was revolutionary. It demanded empathy, respect, and deep context to truly understand a different culture. Boas didn't just criticize bad science, he built the foundation for a more ethical and open-minded anthropology. The interpretive turn, Geertz and meaning. Now we fast forward to the 1970s, and anthropology took another turn, this time toward meaning. Clifford Geertz came along and said, look, culture isn't just what people do, it's what it means to them. He introduced the idea of a quote-unquote thick description, which means digging deep into symbols, actions, and beliefs to really understand their layers. Now, Geertz famously studied a cockfight in Bali, not just as a sport, but as a metaphor for masculinity, rivalry, and social drama. He saw culture like a text, something you have to read, interpret, and analyze, not just simply observing. And this is what shifted anthropology from just describing behavior to interpreting human meaning. The postmodern turn, Trouillot and power. Now let's talk about the third major turn, probably the most challenging one. This is the postmodern turn, where anthropologists started asking, who has the power to define culture in the first place? In comes Michel Rolf Trouillot. In his book, Silencing the Past, it showed how power doesn't just shape politics, it shapes what gets remembered. His example, the Haitian Revolution. It was the only successful slave uprising in history, but for years, it was left out of mainstream history books. Now, why was this? Because it threatened the narrative of colonial dominance. Trouillot argued that silences in history are not accidental. They're produced, manufactured, and anthropology needs to reckon with that. Postmodern thinkers made it clear, the anthropologist is never neutral. Our own voices, biases, and power affect what gets written. Real-world examples. So let's see how these ideas play out in practice. Boas, he worked with indigenous groups like the Kwakiutl and helped preserve their languages, oral traditions, and art. He challenged the idea that they were vanishing, when in fact they were still thriving. Geertz, His cockfight study didn't just entertain, it showed that small acts can carry deep cultural meaning. Trouillot, he exposed how Western institutions erase non-Western history, showing that anthropology has a responsibility to amplify silenced voices, not overwrite them. Now, these aren't just theories, they're ways to understand what people value, how power works, and why stories matter. Now, why do these turns matter? Each of these turns that I've discussed pushed anthropology further. Boas made us respect cultural differences. Geertz made us interpret meaning. And Trouillot made us confront power and silence. Together, they transformed anthropology into a more reflective and responsible field. They made it clear, culture is never objective. It's shaped by symbols, stories, and structures of power. And more importantly, they taught us to ask better questions. They taught us to listen more carefully. What is culture? It's everything. It's complicated, it's political, and it's beautiful. Thanks to thinkers like Boas, Geertz, and Trouillot, we don't just study culture, we try to understand it at a deeper level from the inside out. And if you want to take one thing away from this video, let it be this. The way we tell stories shapes the world we live in. Thanks for watching and keep asking questions.